this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe and leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care friends and family. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so happy that you guys have made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's podcast, I need everyone to do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead and show some love. Tap that screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who may need a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also just want to invite everybody to visit our digital home at the selfcareclub.org, where you will find everything from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I'm encouraging you to give yourself permission to pause, reflect, and to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly, for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop some green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. All right, guys. So we are experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties today, and we are trying to ride through them. So if my voice sounds a little bit different or weird, give me some grace. We're going to try to work out these kinks as we're going through here. For anybody on YouTube, are you experiencing any audio difficulties? And the same question for TikTok. Are you guys hearing any differences now? Does it sound better to you? Yeah, this is how you know it's live. We work out the technical difficulties in real time. We sounding good, y'all? Let me drop the music for y'all for a second. It sounds good. My voice is back. Because for
a minute, it was a little bit crazy over here.
And so I tried to work that out, and then I know that it got a little deep and, okay, so now we're good. I fixed it. All right. We can go back to our queen energy only. And yeah. So listen, I just wanted to make sure y'all was awake. That's how I know y'all really listening to me, when y'all could be like, your voice sounds weird. What happened? But anyways. So listen, y'all. Today's episode is going to be personal. Today's episode is for the ones who didn't just start over once, right? But had to again and again and again. Like, I don't know, is anybody in here can admit to the fact that they've started over again and again and again? Or can you admit that you're one of the ones who have smiled through it publicly, but questioned themselves privately? Or what about the ones who replay moments in their head thinking, why am I back here? What's wrong with me? Why didn't the message stick the first time? Okay, so y'all like, who? It's me. Okay, great. I'm talking to the right people today. I just needed to make sure I was in the right room with the right people, because this conversation is for anyone who has ever felt embarrassed about needing a reset, ashamed for circling back, and heavy for just reintroducing yourself to a version of life that you thought you had already outgrown. And again, if that's you, I want you to hear me clearly right from the start, right out the rip, when I say there is nothing wrong with you. So, for everybody who dropped a green heart or said me, waved their hand, I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with you. See, we live in a world that celebrates the glow up, but rarely talks about the do overs that it takes to get there. We live in a world that praises consistency, but shames recalibration. A world that acts like healing should be neat and linear and permanent, when in real life, healing is layered and cyclical. It's like it just happens over and over again. And, it's deeply human. So today we're talking about starting over more than once. And more importantly, letting go of the shame that tries to come with it. We're unpacking why re-beginning doesn't mean that you failed, why growth often requires a revision, and how choosing yourself again is not weakness, that it is actually wisdom. Elevated Awakenings Butterfly, welcome in. So wherever you're listening from today, in your car, in your bed, your kitchen, or just your quiet moment before the world needs you, I want you to know that this is a safe space. There is no judgment here, no pressure to be over it, no requirements to have it all figured out, just permission to breathe, reflect, and begin again without apology. So if your spirit feels seen, stay here with me. This conversation is absolutely for you today. So we're going to start by talking about why starting over feels like failure, but it isn't. So to do that, we have to begin by naming the lie, right? Because healing gets easier when we stop pretending that we don't hear it. Somewhere along the way, many of us have absorbed this idea that if we had to start over, we failed. That if we didn't get it right the first time or the second time or the third time, that it meant that something was wrong with us. Like we missed the lesson. Like we wasted time. Or like we didn't pray hard enough. Thank you so much, Butterfly. And so we begin to think like, oh, maybe we didn't pray hard enough or try hard enough or want it bad enough. And so for a lot of us, that belief didn't come out of nowhere, right? It came from growing up in environments where survival was rewarded more than self-awareness, where pushing through pain was praised, but pausing to reassess was labeled as weak, where consistency mattered more than alignment and endurance mattered more than peace. So when life is asking us to re-begin, when a relationship ends or a dream shifts or a version of ourselves no longer fits in the space, we don't just feel disappointed, we feel shame. Quiet, heavy, isolating shame. Right? And shame says that, oh, you should be further in life by now. Shame says other people would have handled that better than you. It says, if you were really healed, you wouldn't be back here in this space. But here's the truth that we don't hear often enough. Starting over is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of growth. You don't restart because you're incapable. You restart because you learn something you didn't know before, right? You learned what drains you. You learn what your body rejects. You learn what costs you too much peace. And so wisdom always disrupts the old decisions. I mean, think about it. When you were surviving, you made choices simply to stay afloat, right? right? When you're healing, you make choices to stay whole. Those are two very different decision-making spaces. So, of course, some things have to be reevaluated, right? Some chapters have to be rewritten. But that doesn't mean that the first version was wrong. It just means that the current version has more information. And so starting over doesn't cancel your progress, it just confirms it. So again, if you're listening right now and you're judging yourself for being back at square one or back at the beginning, I want you to gently ask yourself this instead. What do I know now that I didn't know then? Put that in the chat for me, guys. What do I know now that I didn't know then? Because again, that's a great question to ask yourself, especially like I said, if you're being down on yourself for where you are, what do you know now that you didn't know then? Because the moment that you can answer that question, you'll realize that you're not starting from zero, right? You're starting from experience. And experience is not failure, right? It's foundation. And so I think this is a good moment to just take a breath right here, because for many people, this can be a very heavy thing, right? And so I want us to take a breath. Breathe in through your nose. Exhale from your mouth. And I need you to hear me when I say you didn't lose ground. You gained awareness. And that changes everything. Thank you for the heart, me, Belinda. Welcome to the family. And so I think it's important for us to understand that there is a difference between quitting and re-choosing. Elevated awakenings to you, love. Again, there is a difference between quitting and re-choosing. So we're going to slow this part down just a bit, because I think, again, this is where a lot of us get stuck. And this is the area that shame loves to hide. Okay? I have to say this again. There is a huge difference between quitting and re-choosing. But when you're in the middle of it, right? They can feel the same. Thank you for the heart, me. When you're stuck right in the middle of the quitting and re-choosing, it can look the same. And from the outside, both can look like walking away. Right? Both can look like endings. Both can invite opinions that you didn't ask for. No apologies. Welcome back. But internally, they come from two completely different places. See, when you think about quitting is rooted in avoidance. But re-choosing is rooted in awareness. Quitting says, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm done. I give up. Right? But re-choosing says, I see things clearly now, and I need to do that over. I can see areas where I've grown or areas that I need to improve, and I need to rework this, right? When you quit, you're trying to escape the discomfort. But when you re-choose, you're responding to the truth, right? And I think that for many of us, especially women who learned how to endure, this distinction matters deeply. We are taught to stay, taught to be loyal, taught to push through, taught to make it work, even when it's costing us our joy, our voice, and sometimes our sense of self. So when we finally walk away from a situation, it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels confusing, heavy, guilt-ridden, right? Because we weren't taught how to choose ourselves. We were taught how to survive other people's expectations. But ladies, here's the part that I want you to hear. You didn't leave the situation because you were weak. You left because you became honest, right? Honest with your feelings, honest with your needs, your desires, your dreams. You didn't start over because you gave up. You started over because the version of you that said yes back then would never say yes now. Right? And that's not inconsistency. That is integrity. Thank you for the gifts. Re-choosing yourself often looks like ending things that you once prayed for. It looks like outgrowing spaces you once begged for, right? Spaces that you once begged to be in. It looks like saying, this no longer fits who I'm becoming. And so, yeah, in the beginning, that can be painful, right? Because a part of you remembers how badly you wanted it. Part of you remembers the effort, the sacrifice, and the hope that you poured into it. So, yeah, walking away doesn't feel like relief. It actually feels like grief, right? That something's lost. But remember, grief doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice. It means that you cared. And so re-choosing is not impulsive. It's usually slow, internal, and exhausting, if I'm being honest, right? It happens after you've tried communicating, after you've compromised, after you've prayed, waited, and hoped things would change. Most times, by the time you actually re-choose yourself, you're not reacting, you're responding. And see, that's the part that people don't see. So if anybody ever tells you, oh, you just quit, I need you to remind yourself of this truth. And it's simply that I didn't quit. I listened. I didn't give up. I woke up. I didn't abandon anything. I simply returned to myself. Re-choosing is not failure. It is alignment catching up with courage. Choosing yourself again, especially after years of choosing everyone else, is one of the bravest things that you will ever do. You didn't walk away empty. You walked away fully awake, fully loving yourself. Jacqueline K, welcome in, beautiful. Thank you for the heart me. Elevated awakenings to you all. So again, you didn't walk away empty. You walked away awake. But, society will tell us that shame is, running the show. Shame sounds like I should be over this by now, right? And society loves to tell us what we should be over, how long we get to grieve, how long we get to sit in our feelings. So I want to take an opportunity to talk about shame for a moment, because I think that shame is oftentimes the loudest voice in the room, even when no one else is speaking, right? Shame rarely announces itself. It doesn't always come from harsh or negative self-talk. Sometimes it shows up quietly, slipping into your thoughts when you're alone, when you're tired, when you're already doubting yourself. It sounds like, why am I still here? I should be past this. Other people have healed faster than me. Or I'm embarrassed that I'll have to start over again. And what makes shame so heavy is that it convinces you that something is wrong with you, not what you went through. But the truth that I believe that we all need to reclaim is that healing has no expiration date. Can you guys add that to the chat? Healing has no expiration date. There is no universal timeline for getting over pain, especially pain that you had to survive. Somebody pin that for me. Healing has no expiration date. So again, there is no universal timeline. Thank you, Shonda. No universal timeline whatsoever. Emotional wounds don't heal because time passed. They heal because safety and understanding and compassion were finally present. I believe that many of us were forced to stay strong long before we were supported. We learned how to keep moving, keep functioning, keep showing up, even when parts of us were still hurting. So when those unhealed parts start to resurface, shame tries to label it as regression. But it's not regression, it is recognition. It's your body's way of saying, I'm ready now. I wasn't before, but I am now. But shame wants you to believe that if you were truly healed, you wouldn't need to revisit certain lessons. But healing it's not about returning, or it's not about never returning. It's about returning with more tools, more awareness, more self-compassion than you had before. And I think that's why therapy is so amazing, because it gives you the tools. It teaches you the names for things. And so when you go back and you revisit things in your past, when you go back and sit with the inner child and you start doing like your mirror work, now you have tools. So you get to revisit this situation, but you get to see it differently now. For many of us, we get to see it for what it really is now. So again, I want you to understand that you are not weak for revisiting something that once overwhelmed you. You are brave for facing it when you finally felt strong enough to do so. But again, if we're being honest, some things couldn't be healed earlier because you were too busy surviving. So there was no way for you to heal it before because you were too busy surviving. So in reality, you didn't ignore the work. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. So we have to understand that the shame dissolves when we replace judgment with curiosity. So instead of our judging ourselves, we go back to that question again. What do I know now that I didn't know then? Take that shame away and replace it with curiosity. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, try asking what part of me needs a little love right now. What part of me needs some tenderness? Instead of saying I should be over this, try saying I'm meeting this with more compassion than I ever have. I'm loving on me in ways that I never have before, right? The goal of healing is not to rush past the pain. It is to integrate it without letting it define you. So if you're starting over and shame is tapping you on your shoulder, let this be your reminder that you're not late, you're not behind, that you are healing in real time, and that you are right on time for the version of you that is finally ready to be held with care. This is another, opportunity to breathe. We're just right here. Inhale. Exhale. Release the judgment and simply just allow yourself to heal without a deadline. My healing does not have an expiration date. I am finally understanding that I will never be healed until I die, right? But as long as there is breath in my lungs, I will be healing. And I'm not afraid of that. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm forever going to be a work in progress because I'm always going to be choosing to elevate, to take it to the next level, right? I'm always going to wake up every day wanting to be 1% better than I was yesterday. Not that I was a horrible person yesterday. I just want to be 1% better. And sometimes that means I have to realign. Sometimes I have to recalibrate. It's like when you're in the car and you're using your navigation system. I think I might know a quicker route. And it's telling me to go here. And I'm like, maybe I know there's some construction ahead. So maybe I'm just going to go ahead and make this right turn, even though it told me to go straight. But I can see the traffic is stopped. So I'm going to bust this right real quick. It doesn't say that the whole trip is over. It just says, let me recalculate this. Right? So again, you're not back at square one when you start over. You're just starting with wisdom. It's like if you're playing a video game and you keep dying because you keep doing the same thing. And every single time that level starts again, you do the same exact thing that you did before and you keep dying and nothing changes unless something changes. Now, you can change something and maybe it won't make a difference. Maybe it'll still die, right? Maybe you still lose that level. But again, nothing changes if nothing changes. Yeah, you said I go this way, you go that way. So again, I just want you to understand that you're not back at square one. You're just starting over with wisdom. You want something to change. And so sometimes we have to be that change. We have to be what's different. And I think that this is the area that many people misinterpret what's actually happening. A lot of times when something ends, you find yourself at the beginning again. And so your mind immediately says, I'm back at square one. But that's not true and it's not fair to you. Square one assumes that nothing has changed. Square one assumes that you've learned nothing. Square one assumes that you're the same person you were when you started. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I look at who I used to be before I was very intentional about my healing journey, there is a lot about me that has changed. When I look back at square one before I started my healing journey, I can honestly say I've learned a lot, right? And so when I go back to that square one, I can proudly admit that I'm not the same person that I was before. So again, we understand that when we go back to that person who was a people pleaser or who tolerated everything or whatever, we know we're not that person anymore. Right? Because now we're starting with experience, with discernment, with boundaries that didn't exist the first time. Probably couldn't even spell the word boundary. I'm over here like, use it in a sentence. What does it mean? All right. So you have to understand that you're starting again with a nervous system that now recognizes red flags instead of rationalizing them, with a voice that is quicker to speak up. Because see, I'm going to tell you how I feel now. Old Helen, honey, she ain't talk much. She just went along to get along, right? But now I'm like, no. First of all, that ain't it. Don't like it. Don't want it. Ain't coming. Right? Because I'm quick to speak up now. Right? To use that intuition that's louder because I finally learned to listen to it. So that's not starting from zero. That is starting from wisdom. Wisdom is earned, not given. And to be honest with you, most of it is paid for through discomfort. You know what drains you now. You know what costs you too much emotionally. You know the difference between potential and consistency. You know when something feels off, or if it just looks good on paper. And because you know these things now, your restart is different. This version of you isn't, rebuilding from desperation. She's actually rebuilding from clarity. You're no longer asking, will they still choose me? You're asking, does this align with who I'm becoming? Because I don't really give a damn if they choose me. I choose me. I wake up every morning and I love me. And see, there's a difference. I can remember as a teenager waking up wondering, was anybody else thinking about me? Did anybody else love me? Would other people care for me? I would get dressed and I would say, ooh, would so-and-so like this? Is this going to get a compliment today? Is this going to get attention today? So I never felt beautiful enough because I was always wondering what someone else had to say. And that's middle school and high school for you. It'll play with your mind. But as I got older, I stopped giving a damn what other people thought about what I wore, how I wear my hair, right? Because now I'm clear and I love me. I like the outfit. I like the glasses. I like this hairstyle. So every single morning I wake up choosing me and loving me. And throughout the day, if I get a compliment, that's just a bonus. That's just extra. It's just confirmation for what I already know. Right? Because once you start healing, you're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're just simply here protecting your peace. And that's growth. And so, yeah, sometimes it feels uncomfortable to admit how much you've changed. And I think that's because it requires letting go of the old narrative that you were wrong before. Because you weren't wrong, you were just learning. I'm not going to shame teenage me for not loving herself enough, right? Because she was just learning how to love herself. Unfortunately, she wasn't blessed with someone constantly pouring that in and affirming her. So teenager me was just responding to life with the tools that she had. Early adult me, again, responding to life with the tools that she had. But this girl now, she got a lot of tools in her bag, right? So now I get to respond to life with what I have now. So when we look at growth, we have to understand that growth doesn't shame the earlier versions of you. It honors them. So when you find yourself feeling discouraged about restarting, I just want you to remind yourself that you're not rebuilding from the ground up, right? You're building on a stronger foundation, a foundation that is reinforced by lessons and boundaries and self-trust. Starting over with wisdom means that you move slower, but with more intention. That you choose differently, not because you're afraid, but because you're aware. And awareness is not a setback. It's an upgrade. So I just want you to know that you didn't lose progress. You just deepened it. I also want to just spend a moment talking about what comes after restarting. Some of the common things that I hear people talking about when they start over is the grief that comes after, the grief, the loss, the burnout. And so if we're being honest, sometimes starting over doesn't feel empowering. right? I say this multiple times a day. Sometimes it does not feel empowering whatsoever. To be honest, sometimes it feels devastating. Sometimes the restart after you lost something you truly wanted to keep, maybe like a relationship that you prayed over, or a dream that you were nurturing quietly, a version of your life that you imagine yourself growing old in, right? Sometimes when you have to let go of those things or you restart from those things, the pain isn't just about what ended, it's about what you hoped would last. So if you're restarting from a place of grief, I just want you to know that you're not weak, that you're just human. You're just human. And I don't know, when I think about grief doesn't just show up, when somebody dies. It shows up when plans fall apart, when trust breaks, when you realize the life that you were building can't continue in the way that you thought it would. And again, this is the area where shame tries to sneak in again, telling you that if you were stronger, if you were more healed, more faithful, that this wouldn't feel so heavy, that this grief that you were feeling would not feel so heavy. But just like shame, grief is not a sign of failure either. It is proof of attachment, care, and depth. And burnout works the same way, right? When you're forced to restart because your body has shut down, or your spirit has gotten tired, or your joy has disappeared, that's not quitting. That's your inner wisdom pulling the emergency brake. Right? You didn't rest because you were lazy. You rested because you were depleted. You didn't walk away because you couldn't handle it. You walked away because continuing would have cost you yourself. So starting over after burnout is simply your body's way of saying, we can't keep living like this. I think for people who experience chronic pain, this is a good reminder for you to understand that is your body's way of saying, we cannot keep living like this. Sometimes it's what we're eating. Sometimes it's what we're drinking. Sometimes it's the lifestyle that we live, or the relationship that we're in, or the self-neglect, right? The abuse, the pushing through things. But either way, it is our body's way of saying we cannot continue on like this. And I think that message alone deserves respect. Not judgment. Respect. And I think that this is something that is not talked about enough. But I'm going to say it, contrary to, society's beliefs and, what's trending these days. I'm going to say it. You can mourn what didn't work and still trust that the ending was necessary. You can mourn what didn't work and still trust that ending was necessary. I'm going to add to that and say, you can miss what was and honor what had to end. Grief and clarity can coexist. I can love you and not want you into my immediate, bubble or life, whatever. Because grief and clarity can exist. They can coexist. So if you're listening and your restart feels heavy instead of hopeful, I just want you to give yourself permission to grieve without rushing to heal. Don't force positivity, right? Don't minimize the loss. Don't try to timestamp it. Let yourself feel fully without turning it into self-blame. Starting over after grief isn't about bouncing back. Lady Blue, Elevated Awakening, sister girl. It's not about bouncing back, guys. It's about choosing to stay open after life tried to close you. And that takes courage. So if today all you can do is show up and breathe, that's enough. Job well done. If all you can do is sit with the ache and not run from it, that is healing. Take your time. This restart doesn't erase what you've lost. It simply honors what you loved while still choosing to move forward. And that is strength. So again, we have to begin releasing the timeline that we're beating ourselves up with. Elevated Awakenings, Kale, welcome in, sister girl. We have to let go of this timeline. I want to talk about the clock, right? And I want to talk about the clock because so many of us, for so many of us, it's not time that hurts. It's the way we measure ourselves against the time. I think that somewhere along the way, we were handed some sort of invisible timeline, right? A checklist where we were supposed to, be at by a certain age or a certain season or a certain stage of life. And so when our reality doesn't line up to that timeline, we start to internalize that as failure. But I'm going to say it again. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not running out of time. You are living on a human timeline, not a performance-based timeline. And this is where like the comparison trap starts to fall in, right? Because comparison convinces you that everyone else is ahead of you. When in reality, you're just seeing the hindsight reel of their lives. Not the pauses, not the pivots. Elevated Awakenings, Afro T-Lock, welcome in, sis. Right? You're just seeing their glow up reels, not their pauses, the pivots, the private breakdowns that it took for them to get there. Thank you for the heart me. Yes, comparison is the thief of joy. And anytime you're going through a season of restarting, comparison gets louder, right? And it starts making you ask yourself questions like, why did it take me so long? Why am I still figuring this out? Why am I repeating this again? Why did they move on faster than me? But we have to understand that healing doesn't operate on speed. Healing only operates out of safety. And so the reality of it is some lessons take longer because they're deeper. Some seasons stretch further because they're shaping your discernment, not just your destination. So let's be real. Many of us didn't have the luxury of healing when we needed to. We were too busy surviving. Too busy being the strong one for everybody else. Too busy holding everything together. So now when life slows down, that's not a punishment. That is permission. It's your permission to feel. It is your permission to rest. Your permission to choose differently. So the timeline that you're comparing yourself to was never designed with your story in mind. Your path requires patience because it's teaching you depth. And depth cannot be rushed. So releasing this timeline doesn't mean that you're going to stop dreaming or stop planning. But what it does mean is that you're going to stop shaming yourself for how long it takes you to become whole. I think that the only question that matters isn't how fast I'm moving. It's, am I moving in alignment? Because alignment may take longer, but it saves you from restarting for the same reason again. So don't be ashamed to be in your season of alignment. You're not late, right? You're learning. And there's something so magical about the healing process when you think of reflection and release and reclaiming your restart. This moment, I don't know. I think I'd rather start with the reflection. Let's do like an exercise in real time. Because I don't want to rush through this. I want you guys to have a moment to just be with yourself. So if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road, but just maybe loosen your grip on the steering wheel a little bit. If you're at home, maybe put your feet flat on the floor. Rest your hand over your heart. And I want you guys to just take a deep breath in. Let it out slowly. Again, breathe in. And out. Now I want you to reflect. Not from not from judgment, but from compassion. The first question that I'm going to ask you to ask yourself is, what did my last ending teach me that my new beginning needs? What did my last ending teach me that my new beginning needs? What did my last ending teach me that my new beginning needs? And I'm not talking about what went wrong. I'm talking about what you learned. What truth did you finally accept? What boundary did you earn? What promise, what did you promise yourself that you wouldn't ignore again? I want you to let that answer come up without forcing it. For a separate reflection, I want you to ask yourself, where am I restarting with clarity instead of desperation? Where am I restarting from clarity instead of desperation? Because again, there's a difference between starting over because you're afraid and starting over because you're awake. I want you to notice where you're choosing yourself more intentionally this time. Right? Notice where you're moving slower, where you're listening to your body instead of overriding it. Because that's growth. Even though it doesn't look dramatic, that's growth. Question number 3 that I want you to ask yourself. What would compassion sound like if I spoke to myself today? What would compassion sound like if I spoke to myself today? If you talk to yourself the way that you would a sister or a friend or the younger version of you, what would you say? Would you rush her? Would you shame him? Or would you just remember that, you were doing the best that you could? Would you remind her or him that they're doing the best that they could with what they know. Let that voice replace the critical one. So now we're going to even take these reflections a step further. And let's anchor them in some affirmations. These are affirmations that you can repeat out loud or quietly in your spirit. You don't have to worry about writing them in the chat. You can just drop a green heart or something else to let me know you're there. I release the shame of restarting. I release the shame of restarting. I release the shame of restarting. I honor my courage to choose myself again. I honor my courage to choose myself again. I honor my courage to choose myself again. I trust the wisdom that I gained from what didn't work. I trust the wisdom that I gained from what didn't work. I trust the wisdom that I gained from what didn't work. I am allowed to begin again without explaining myself. I am allowed to begin again without explaining myself. I am allowed to begin again without explaining myself. This restart is not punishment, it's alignment. This restart is not punishment, it's alignment. No problem. This restart is not punishment, it's alignment. And our final affirmation for today: I am not behind, I am becoming. I am not behind, I am becoming. I am not behind, I am becoming. Take one more deep breath in and exhale. Yes. One more time. Breathe in and out. Yeah, that last one hit y'all. I am not behind, I am becoming. And, that's just an important reminder, right? This moment matters because reflection without compassion becomes self-criticism. But reflection with compassion becomes healing. So you're not starting over empty. You're starting over informed, aware, and intentional. And so this is the part where we bring it all home, guys, right? Choosing again, on purpose, with a purpose, without apology, right? Because starting over isn't just something, it's not just about what you walked away from. It's about what you're choosing now. Yes, I am not behind. I am becoming the bar. Yes. There's a quiet power that comes when you stop explaining your healing to people who benefited from your silence. When you stop justifying your restarts to folks who never really had to live inside your body, your mind, your heart. You don't owe anyone performance of progress. You don't owe, or you don't need permission to pivot. You don't have to prove that this restart is the last one in order for it to be valid. Some of the strongest decisions you'll ever make won't be loud. They won't be celebrated publicly. They'll simply feel peaceful. Sometimes unfamiliar, but that's just because that chaos used to feel normal to you. So choosing again means that you're no longer operating from an autopilot. Love you, Kale. Have an amazing day. You're asking yourself new questions now, like, does this feel aligned? Does this honor my nervous system? Does this support the life that I'm trying to build? And when I say, does it support the life I'm trying to build, I'm not talking about just the image that I want to maintain, right? Sometimes choosing again means just choosing slower, or choosing less, or choosing differently than you did before, even if it confuses everybody around you. Let them be confused. Your clarity doesn't require a consensus. You don't have to take a poll. You don't need to get permission. What matters is that you trust yourself enough to begin again without dragging, old shame into a new season. That you don't punish yourself for outgrowing what once felt necessary. That you don't minimize your courage because the world loves consistency more than it loves truth. Here's what I want you to remember going forward. You can start over and still be successful. You can start over and still be called. You can start over and still be deeply wise. Starting over isn't the opposite of confidence. It's confidence saying, I refuse to keep betraying myself. So if this is your second start, or your third, or your fourth, or your 50th, let it be the one where you finally move with intention instead of pressure. Let it be the one where peace becomes the metric, not the speed. This isn't about getting it perfect. It's about just getting it honest. It is about being present. And honestly, honesty itself will always lead you somewhere better than shame ever could. So understand that we are not circling, we're ascending. And this particular restart for this season is sacred. Now, family, before we close out this room, I just want to pause one last time. I just want to do a check-in, see how everybody's spirit's doing. Green hearts if we good. Stop sign if we need a pause for a moment. Let me see some green so I know we good. All right, I see you, butterfly. Bricks, okay. We got some green hearts. I don't see no stop signs or no red X's, so I believe that we're doing good. Maybe we need to take another deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And if nothing else stays with you from this conversation, I see you, Danielle. Thank you for that green heart. I think it's important that we have check-ins from time to time because I know sometimes the information, as softly, as nicely or gently as I try to deliver it, I know that sometimes it ends hard. It hits us right in the season and you're like, Lord, how is she talking to me? It's like those days where you've been out of church for a while and you go back and it's like the pastor's talking right to you. You're trying to figure out who told pastor your business. So I know sometimes I be all in y'all's business, but it definitely is coming from a place of love. But I know that intent doesn't erase offense. And so I always just want to make sure that I'm checking in with you guys to make sure that something didn't land a little more painfully, or that a little more work isn't needed in a particular area. So that's why I asked the question. But again, if nothing else stays with you from today's conversation, I just want you to let this truth settle in your spirit. And it's that you are allowed to start over more than once. If you don't remember anything else that I said today, just know that you are allowed to start over more than once. And it's not because you failed. It's not because you weren't strong enough. It's because you grew, because you learned, because you listened to yourself in ways that you didn't before. So there's no shame in re-beginning. There is no embarrassment in choosing differently. There is no weakness in honoring the wisdom that came from what didn't work. You're not going backwards. You're diving in deeper. Deeper in alignment. Deeper in self-trust. Deeper in the version of you that no longer abandons his or herself to make other people comfortable. So as you step into your day today, I want you to carry this permission with you. You have permission to move at your own pace. You have permission to pivot without explanation. You have permission to rest without guilt. Permission to begin again with grace. And if shame tries to follow you into your next chapter, gently remind it that you're not starting over because you're broken. You're starting over because you're becoming. And our goal is simply to be 1% better today than we were yesterday. Now, before we part ways, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even when it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I cannot wait to connect with you all again soon.